Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present L'Chaim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
I'm Mark Golub, and there are many extraordinary men and women serving the Jewish community in a myriad of ways, ensuring the future of the State of Israel and of world Jewry. Very often, however, they are not household names in the Jewish community. They simply are in the trenches, doing the heavy lifting, without fanfare or much public recognition. And one of these extraordinary individuals is Dani Dayan, who in 2016 became Israel's Consul General in New York, representing the state of Israel throughout New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Delaware. He's the face of Israel in all of these states. Let me tell you a little bit about Dani Dayan and his most impressive background. Making Aliyah in 1971, Dani Dayan served in the IDF's elite Mamram Computerized Data Processing Center, rising to the rank of Major. Dani studied at Bar-Ilan University and then earned his master's in finance from Tel Aviv University. At the young age of 26, he founded his own company, Eldad Systems, specializing in sophisticated information systems, which Dani ran as CEO and then as chairman of the board until 2005. And from then on till today, Dani Dayan has been intimately involved in Israeli politics and the most sensitive areas of Israeli life today. For 6 years, Dani Dayan was the chairman of the Council of Jewish Communities in Judea and Samaria, and was the voice of the settler movement to governments throughout the world. He also became a leader in an Israeli political party, Techiyah, and was instrumental in Techiyah's inclusion in the 1990 coalition government of Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir. Dani Dayan has also served on the Israel Broadcasting Authority Board of Directors and on the Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial Council, and that's only a part of his amazing career on the Israeli scene. It is such a joy having you at this table. Thank you for joining me.
It's a pleasure to be here, Mark.
Thank you.
And I am mostly guilty as charged.
Okay, mostly.
Mostly.
Okay. Very sweet. I want to know a little bit more about you first, okay? You're born in
Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Aires. And, you know, what kind of Jewish home are you born into? Who are your parents?
In a very Zionist home.
Yes.
In a very Jewish, a very Zionist, or non-observant home. I mean, we went every now and then to shul, to the synagogue, to an Orthodox one, but we were not really an observant.
Basically a secular?
A secular but staunchly Zionist home. My father, my parents, actually, both of them were involved in the predecessor of Likud, the Herut movement,
yes.
Menachem Begin's political movement. I would even say Zev Jabotinsky movement. One of my first reminiscences is one day that Menachem Begin visited Buenos Aires, the late Israeli former prime minister, the head of the Irgun. Those days he was the leader of the opposition. And my parents took me to his hotel. They were very good friends. And he wasn't there, but his wife Aliyah was. And then a few minutes later, when he came in, he said, "Aliyah, didn't you order a Coke for the child?" So I remember that very vividly, my first memory of Menachem Begin.
That's marvelous. Where were your parents from?
My parents are from Eastern Europe. I mean, my mother was born in Argentina. My father was born actually in Ukraine. But also my maternal grandparents came from Russia, from what is today Moldova, what is today Belarus. So an Eastern European Ashkenazi family that emigrated to Argentina. Some of my maternal side before the First World War, my father at the young age of 7 between the wars.
Okay. Your father's name?
My father's name is Moshe Dayan, in Israel, in Argentina, Moises, obviously.
What a
And
fabulous
we
name.
are the same clan, the same family,
are
the
you?
same tribe. Moshe Dayan, the general Moshe Dayan, my father shared a common great-grandfather. But that was more merely formal. There were no really family
I understand.
links.
And what was he like? Did he influence you?
Yes, a great extent. In some senses, I think my father was some of those persons that I think don't exist anymore, a kind of Renaissance type. On one side, he was a scientist. He was an oceanographer. But on the other hand, his real passions were literature, Tanakh, the Bible, and Jewish philosophy, general literature, Hebrew literature, Yiddish literature. So except for the fact that I regret today that he didn't teach me Yiddish, he influenced me a lot.
Okay. And it sounds like you were surrounded by Yiddishkeit Jewishness, regardless of whether you were a secular Jewish home or an observant one.
Look, you know, Mark, the Jewish community in Argentina managed to build, without offending, of course, New York, managed to build what I think was the best and most extensive educational Jewish system in the world. In the morning, I would go to a public school, an Argentinian school, learning all the mathematics and Argentinian history and geography and so on and so on. And in the afternoon to a Hebrew school in which we learned in Hebrew the language, the Bible, the history of the Jewish people, the geography of the land of Israel, Israeli songs, etc., etc.
Oh, that's wonderful. What was your mother's name?
My mother's name is Fanny.
Fanny?
She's she's now 93.
Mazal Tov.
And
who was she?
She was a social worker. She studied after I mean my older brother and myself were born.
Just two of you?
Two of us. By the way, my parents knew each other in their Zionist activity. So it was only natural that I will become such a strong, staunch Zionist, in spite of the fact that my brother is not, as ideologically adhere to Zionism like I am.
Okay. So at 15, you make Aliyah with your entire family.
That's correct.
Why?
Zionist reasons. We always knew that at some point in our life we will move to Israel. I admire the courage of my parents that took that decision ultimately at the age of 50. It was not easy. They really went into the unknown, but they succeeded.
Was it hard for you?
It's not the ideal age to move from one environment to the other. On the other hand, the fact that I was quite fluent in Hebrew, I cannot say that I was as fluent as I am now, but I think in 3-4 months I became completely fluent in Hebrew. That made it much more easy.
So did you fall in love with the country?
Yes, I think that, you know, if there was a time in my life in which I consider becoming more observant religiously, was that period of the encounter with the state of Israel, with the land of Israel. Definitely, it was also a very strong spiritual experience.
Oh, speak to me more about that, because you know there are many people who sometimes talk about a lack of spirituality in Israel, that the Israeli grows up and there's again a certain kind of Jewishness all around the Israeli. And the Israeli Jew feels, I'm an Israeli, and by being an Israeli, it's enough.
Well, Mark, first of all, I have to remind you what period we are talking about. I'm referring to the extraordinary period between the Six-Day War and the Yom Kippur War.
Yes, you come in 71.
1971. Actually, I will tell you, we were due to be the last immigrants, the last Olim of 1970. Because our flight, our El Al flight, was due to land in the then Lod Airport, was not even called Ben Gurion Airport, at 11:30, something like that, p.m. on December 31st. But it was an El Al flight, so it was late. So we were the first immigrants of 1971 at 1 a.m.
Okay, and your point is you come to Israel at a euphoric time. Yes?
Yes, I think the word euphoric is appropriate.
Yes. And for one moment, where were you in 73?
In 73, I was close, but not yet, to my drafting.
Okay, so you did not have to serve.
No, I entered the army actually at the end of November 1973. The war ended a month earlier.
Okay. Do you remember that period of time? Was it a frightening time for you?
It was not a frightening time in the physical sense. I wasn't worried for my life. It was frightening and it was very depressing for the state of Israel. Yes, they were very difficult times. The sense of, you called it euphoria, became a sense of depression.
Yes. Okay, come back to the other discussion. I said to you that Israelis often don't seem to be involved in Torah, Judaism. There's a certain kind of Israeli observance which almost makes the secular Israeli more observant than a non-Orthodox American Jew. But many Israelis say just by living in Israel, that's enough of a Jewish identity. And you, who live in America, who live in the Golub, the diaspora, you have to worry about going to a synagogue and doing certain Jewish rituals. We don't have to do that. I'm asking you to comment on that, and how did it affect you one way or the other?
Yeah, for me, Judaism is first and foremost a peoplehood. I feel connected to every single Jew in the world. When I visit a foreign country as a tourist, I make a point in searching for old synagogues and even old Jewish cemeteries and to meet Jews. But it doesn't have, for me, a religious aspect. The fact that I go to a synagogue is more a cultural, Jewish cultural thing. Sometimes I say that my religion is Zionism. Actually. I am an ultra-Orthodox Zionist. And in that sense, and also I see Zionism in the classic way of seeing Zionism. This week we bid farewell to a group of Olim that left from JFK to Israel. And I said that there are persons that says in the 21st century Zionism is high-tech, in the 21st century Zionism is this, Zionism is that. I'm an old-fashioned, an old-school Zionist that believes that Zionism is the basic things of living in Israel, contributing to Israel's security, to Israel's existence, etc., etc. On the other hand, it's not a contradiction at all. I see in this age, two extra obligations to our generations. I will say it this way, if you allow me, Mark. There are generations of Jews that have extra obligations. For instance, the generation that in the 40s had the extra obligation to try to save the American Jewry, and unfortunately it failed. In the 70s, we had the extra obligation to save the Soviet Jewry. Unfortunately, we did. In our generation, we have two extra obligations, is to strengthen Israel and to guarantee the continuity of the Jewish people. But if you think in depth about those two obligations, I believe they are one, they are the same.
So talk to me now about conceptually. You live on the West Bank, you live on Judea, Samaria. You live in
Ma'ale Shomron.
Which is close to what?
which is close on one hand to the west to the city of Kfar Saba and to the east to other communities in Samaria.
How long have you lived there?
We moved there from Tel Aviv in 1988.
Long
My
time
wife,
already.
Einata,
Okay.
and I moved.
Okay. And I already
There was the days of the first Intifada, and that was one of the reasons we moved.
Okay. That was you.
Yes, definitely. It was
Meaning
one of
what?
the reasons. We felt that we have to strengthen the Jews living there that are under attack. The first Intifada was concentrated mainly in Judea and Samaria, less in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, the rest of Israel, like the second.
Okay. So you at one point ran Yesha. Is that correct?
I was the
Council
chairman,
of Jew-
yes.
yeah,
I was the chairman
The
for
Council of
6
Jewish
years.
Communities of Judea, Samaria.
That's
You
right.
already said to me, you came out of a family that was somehow embraced the ideology of Jabotinsky and Begin, Beitar, yes?
Definitely.
Okay. And at the moment, when Jews talk about Israel, invariably the conversation moves to, well, what do we do with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? What do we do with the West Bank? There are many American Jews who feel Israel made terrible. I have Yossi Klein Halevi sitting here, Israelis, who say to me, look, mistakes were made back in '67, but at the same time, Judea, Samaria is our biblical homeland. I will have Jews sitting at this table and they will say to me, Israel's primary vision is to be both Jewish
I agree.
and democratic. And that if you're not Jewish and democratic, one without the other is not authentic Zionism. First of all, do you accept that formulation?
Completely.
Completely.
100%.
Okay. Then the question is, how does Israel handle a Palestinian population, some of which are Arab Israelis living inside Israel, and they have the right to vote? And then there is a large Palestinian population on West Bank, Judea, Samaria, who do not vote and are not part of Israeli life. What is your view of how Israel should be dealing with the complexities of the problem? Number one, where do you stand on a two-state solution? And what would you do with the Palestinian population, given the fact that you are so committed to an Israeli presence in Judea, Samaria?
Well, it will be difficult to answer briefly to that, but I will do my best.
Take your time.
Okay.
Take your time.
First of all, you know, Mark, I think that the most important thing, the first question we have to ask ourselves, are we doing something, are we doing an injustice or not? Because if we are doing an injustice, it's totally unacceptable. You know, it might surprise you. I didn't visit South Africa until 1994. I didn't spend my shekels in a country that is run by a racially segregated. So I ask myself every single day, am I doing something unjust or the opposite? And my answer is that I'm doing no injustice. Look, the Israeli-Palestinian, Jewish-Palestinian, Zionist-Palestinian conflict, what is it? Let's try to simplify the conflict. On one hand, there is this Jewish, the Zionist narrative that says, this is our land. You call it biblical, I say historical, it's the same thing. We were expelled, forcibly expelled from our land. We yearn every single day in something that has no comparison in human history, that the people for 2,000 years, every single day, asks God, asks the providence to bring them back to Eretz Israel, to the land of Israel, until a gigantic person, one that really rises once in millennia, Theodor Herzl, converted that yearning into a political movement, the Zionist movement, the national liberation movement of Jewish people. We return to revive our sovereignty in our land. The other narrative, the Palestinian, is as genuine as ours. I am not doubting its sincerity. They said, guys, we are here for 400, 500 years. I don't know who was King David. I don't know who was Samuel the prophet. And even if I know, look, too late. And they see us as a colonialist project, a typical late 19th century European colonialist project. I'm not judging them, I'm describing. Now, as long, both sentiments, by the way, are genuine. I don't doubt it. I'm not saying they are both correct. They are genuine. As long as the Palestinians keep believing that we are colonialists in Tel Aviv, as in Ma'ale Shomron, there is no chance they will compromise with us. Because we really do not compromise with someone that is stealing your home. So in some sense, I say, look, the most important person in the peace process is not the President of the United States. It's not the Prime Minister of Israel. It's not even the President of the Palestinian Authority. The most important person in the peace process is the Minister of Education of the Palestinians. I'm not referring only, to the incitement. I'm talking about something more basic. As long as they don't start to educate their people that Jews and Palestinians, not only Jews, Jews and Palestinians are both indigenous to the land that we call Eretz Israel and they call Palestine, there is until that day, unfortunately, the peace process will not even start. And why my conscience is completely clear? Because I know that there is one constant pattern to this conflict, to the political side of the conflict. Every single time that someone came and offered a territorial compromise, partition, two-state, call it the way you want, we accepted, they rejected. So the current situation is good? No. Is Israel to blame? Could Israel have done anything to change it? No. It is a Palestinian decision to reject territorial compromises. And therefore, if they are not ready for peace, I don't see any reason why a Jew cannot reside in Judea and Samaria. There is a reason if you have two contradicting values, Jews returning to their ancestral homeland on one hand, peace on the other. But if they reject anyway any peace compromise, then there is the value of Jewish presence in our ancestral homeland. There is no reason not to realize it. I'm not saying, by the way, Mark, that we do not do, and we will not do our share of injustices. You know what? Stupidities. But in the big picture, in a 100 years conflict, everyone does injustices, everyone does stupidities. But in the big picture, my conscience is completely clear.
Okay. So I want to suggest what someone who hears you and sees it differently might ask you. The argument I hear all the time is, I understand the Palestinians at the moment have no leadership, which is making the education that you're asking for possible, and they basically are rejectionists to their core. And it always bothers me that American and Western leadership doesn't seem to understand that the basic problem is the one you described. You have a people for whom, and it's wonderful the way you say it, it's genuine from their perspective. To their core, they believe it would violate everything that is who they are, if they ever were to say, okay, we'll share the land. The Jew has said from 1936 till today, we will share the land, and the Palestinian, the Muslim, the Arab Muslim, has said, over my dead body. Once somebody says that, the discussion is over. However, the answer I hear is, the problem with Dani Dayan's perspective is, he makes it impossible for there to be some progress in the future. No, and what I always hear is, I hear this all the time, the Jew is so committed to peace. The Jew must do everything, even though he can't, even though it's not possible. We still should be doing something because maybe we'll do something and the other side will change its mind down the road. And we cannot do something today that will preempt a compromise down the road? What do you say?
Well, let's analyze it. Apparently, in first sight, it makes sense what you said. But let's analyze it. Why the presence of Jews in Beit El should be a problem? If the Palestinians reject peace, then there is no problem. If the Palestinians suddenly say, you know what, you are right, Jews have a right to a part of Palestine, Eretz Israel, let's make peace. Why can a Palestinian state have a Jewish minority? Mm-hmm. Look, you refer to the Arab citizens of Israel. We have approximately 20% Arab population. We have Supreme Court judges. You know, Joe, Mark, that
who are Arab Israeli.
Of course, of
yes.
course. So why the assumption that if a Palestinian state is created in Judea, Samaria / the West Bank, it has been devoid of any Jewish minority? So even if you accept the possibility that in the future, a very dubious one, in the future we'll accept partition, then even then there is no, and I will even dare to say, you know, think about it, Mark. If Nelson Mandela would have said, guys, I want black rule in South Africa and to expel all the white people from South Africa, he wouldn't be Nelson Mandela that we admire. And he and rightly was awarded a Peace Nobel Prize. He would be just another bigot like Abu Mazen. So there is no reason to accept that.
By the way, you've been in positions of political leadership for a long time. You know everybody. Explain to me, why doesn't America, why doesn't the American administration, why is it that White House after White House doesn't see the justice of what you're saying? How can it be that the West in general, the West is willing to support a Palestinian position that in this two-state solution, which I agree with you, I don't believe it'll ever happen in our lifetime. But the two-state solution that's always discussed, Dani, is one in which every Jewish settlement must be disbanded and no Jew may be permitted to live there. How does the West, how does America, Britain, France, Germany, how do they support a Palestinian position that takes this Judenrein approach where they would accept it in no other context? How?
You know, Mark, I think that I'm not sure that this is the only case, but it's one of the most clear cases. The opposition to Jewish presence in Judea and Samaria, the so-called West Bank, to the settlements, has already attained the magnitude of a religion. It's an axiom, it has its dogmas, it has its symbolism, labeling products, etc., etc. It has, if you allow me, it's halakha. It's religious procedures. It's completely devoid from any rational thinking, and it's not an isolated case. We see in current politics other cases like that, but maybe this is the most clear one in which an axiom became a kind of religion that it has it's faithful, it's everything.
Is it anti-Semitism?
If there is anti-Semitism.
Is it anti-Semitism?
Oh, if it is anti-Semitism, I am very careful in branding political positions like anti-Semitic, but no doubt that in some persons it is anti-Semitic. I'm not saying that, for instance, I will never say that a person like John Kerry, for instance, was driven by anti-Semitism. No.
Or President Obama.
Or President Obama.
I agree with you. Incidentally, Does this mean you do not support the idea of annexing the West Bank?
Look, you said that Israel should be Jewish and democratic.
No,
I
you said-
couldn't.
you
yeah,
said
you
it.
said, and I said that I can't agree more.
Okay.
I can't agree more. Yes, I think that ultimately, if we are going to solve the conflict, and unfortunately it's a big if, we will have to find a peculiar solution to a peculiar conflict. Maybe we will have to find a regional accommodation in which other countries will also be part of that accommodation. Maybe we'll have a kind of, I don't know, I'm just fantasizing now, it's a political science fiction, a kind of joint condominium over some areas in which each population is governed by a different country. I don't know. We have to, one of the problems of the last decades is that the ideological tyranny of the two-state dogma didn't permit fresh thinking, innovative thinking. And maybe now we will start to think new ideas. Some of them obviously will be detached from reality, weird, but maybe we will find a solution that, a formula that can mildly accommodate the aspirations and the needs of each side. Otherwise, I am pessimistic about I don't think, personally, I'm a diplomat now. I obviously represent my government's position, but before I was a diplomat, I didn't believe neither in the one-state solution nor the two-state solution.
So you are not advocating annexation?
Again, Mark, I have to be very careful. This is the first time for me since I arrived in New York 1 year ago, since I was discharged from the army more than 40 years ago, that I am not free to say everything I want to say. I'm a diplomat. I represent my country. I represent the policy of my country, of my government. But I would say the following: the fact that Menachem Begin, Yitzhak Shamir, Ariel Sharon, and Benjamin Netanyahu didn't annex is not a coincidence.
Mm-hmm. We will leave it there, although maybe when you're done in political office, you'll come back and I'll ask the question again. But I think your answer was profound. Okay. So at the moment, you do not feel Israel is being unjust in the way it administers Palestinian territories on the West Bank?
No, and in the big picture, no. In 2014, when I was still a private citizen and not a government official, I published in the New York Times an op-ed that was entitled Peaceful Non-Reconciliation. And my thesis was that there is no chance for a reconciliation between Jews and Palestinians, but let's do the non-reconciliation and the non-solving of the conflict in a civilized way. And I advocated there a series of steps by Israel that would improve dramatically the quality of life, the human rights situation of the Palestinians. Unfortunately, I got very good reactions to that from both sides of the political spectrum. For instance, I remember that I got a phone call from former Defense Minister Moshe Arens, which is a right-wing politician, and then from the former Shabak Secret Service head Yuval Diskin, which is left-wing, and they both praised the idea of first detoxifying the atmosphere. Unfortunately, I published in a very bad timing, because 3 days later, 3 youngsters in Gush Etzion were kidnapped and murdered, and the whole area deteriorated into chaos and conflict in Gaza.
This is 2014.
2014.
Very recently.
The summer of 2014. And I still believe in those ideas that we can do.
Give me one example of how to detoxify.
One example, look, I never understood why a software engineer from Ramallah, a Palestinian software engineer from Ramallah, cannot work in an high-tech company in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem even in the absence of peace. And he has to emigrate to Dubai or to find a non-suitable job in Ramallah. That's an example. Why do we have to wait until peace comes? There are security issues that we have to consider, therefore things have to be reversible. And the most clear thing is the refugee camps. It doesn't make sense that hundreds of thousands of fifth-generation descendants of original refugees still live in squalid conditions in order to maintain a political claim, the so-called claim of return.
Yes. Is it Israel's fault?
No, not at all, not at all. As I said, I would suggest to the Palestinians, maybe this is a case in which Israel cannot do it, obviously, unilaterally. Let's rehabilitate the camps. And we are not strings attached. I mean, you can continue to believe in what you believe, but the fact that the fifth generation, children of the fifth and sixth generation continue to live by the Palestinians, it's a Palestinian decision. For me, it's unfortunate.
You would like to see Israel help in some way rebuild or restructure?
Absolutely.
Interesting.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
Absolutely. Obviously, Israel cannot do it alone.
Yes.
But Israel should even take the lead. But unfortunately, the Palestinians reject it.
And in your mind, what's the goal of that kind of act?
It's not a peace deal. It's I mean, I think sometimes that we devote too much thought to how to solve the conflict, which is impossible, instead of going for the second best, that is less important, I agree, but is doable, to improve conditions of life, dignity, human rights, until a peace treaty comes.
Lishma, for its own sake, or is there some practical good that would come of it in your mind?
You know, improving life of persons is a good thing to do.
In and of itself.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And then we will discuss which political solution to the conflict. But let's discuss about it, Palestinians and Israelis, in a dignified situation and not in a much more problematic one that we have one now.
Are there individual Palestinians, better said, is there a large number of individual Palestinians who, if they were given the opportunity by their leadership, would be willing to share the land with the Jew?
Unfortunately, I think the number of the percentage is diminishing because of the incitement and education. Look, I will give you an example, Mark. When a Palestinian sees, for instance, something that I was witness to personally, the new Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres from Portugal, came to a synagogue in Manhattan. And he said the following, it's, quote, the structure that was destroyed in the year 70 by the Romans in Jerusalem was a Jewish temple, unquote. No political conclusion, no therefore this or that, a very well-known historical fact. The following day, the Palestinian envoy to the UN presents a formal protest to the Secretary General and says, you offended the Palestinians, you have to retract yourself, you have to apologize to the Palestinian people. So we are going in the opposite direction, in the opposite of even more than ever negating Israel's Jewish link to the land. So unfortunately, I think that the number of Palestinians really believing that we can share the land and we should share the land is diminishing. And you know, people sometimes say that the demand by Prime Minister Netanyahu that the Palestinians recognize Israel as a Jewish state is a tactic, a way to annoy the Palestinians, etc. Nonsense. This is the most important demand in order to seek peace, because it's not enough for the Palestinians to recognize Israel de facto existence because we are strong. Because that will be an armistice. That will be a ceasefire until they sense they have to come to the conclusion that there is justice in our presence here, that is justified. Until that happens, as I told you, the peace process did not start.
It's a tragedy, isn't it?
It's a tragedy.
Yes, it's a human tragedy. Speak for one moment about water and electricity. I hear many people say that one of the problems, and again, this is in the context of, I agree with everything you say. It's a human tragedy. But I do hear that Israel is controlling water and electricity in a way that is unjust, to come back to some of the things you said at the very beginning of our meet today. What's the truth here?
Let's make a clear difference between Judea and Samaria and Gaza. In Judea and Samaria, there is no electricity shortage at all. All the needs of Palestinians in electricity are met. Also, Israel contributes large amounts of water. Israel solved its water problems, that, as you know, through desalination and other ways. And now we give away water to Jordan, to the Palestinian Authority, much more than the Oslo Accords with the Palestinians or the peace treaty with Jordan. We have an obligation. There is no, I hear about water problems in the Palestinian Authority. They are not only not caused by Israel, on the contrary, Israel contributes to it. With Gaza, it's a different situation. Look, we left Gaza, we took from Gaza not only our civilians, not only our structures, not only our military bases, not only our soldiers, we even took from Gaza our dead people from their graves. And actually in Gaza, a de facto Palestinian state was established. Now, 12 years ago, after the so-called disengagement, the Gazans were given a choice that is seldom given to a group of persons. They had the opportunity to choose whether they want to become a Middle Eastern Singapore or a Middle Eastern Somalia. Would they have decided to be a Middle Eastern Singapore, Israel and the entire international community would have contributed hugely to that. Unfortunately, they decided to be Somalia. They decided to be an area of warlords. They decided to be an area controlled by gangs, and one big gang, the Hamas, and to use Gaza as a launching pad for more and more and more aggressions against Israeli civilians. So we had no other choice than to impose a kind of inspectionary regime, what enters Gaza, what goes out from Gaza. There was an issue with electricity now, that's true, but in this case, we were just performing a policy of the Palestinian Authority. Yes, there are humanitarian problems in Gaza. There is no doubt. In an economy in which every single penny, every single dollar, every single yen, every single ruble that is contributed is used to amass armaments, to construct aggressive tunnels instead of schools, creating jobs, of course you will have a humanitarian crisis. That's economics 101. Mm-hmm.
You know, you talked earlier about the genuineness of the Palestinian perspective, which I thought was just wonderful to hear from someone in your position. Does this extend in your mind to how the Palestinian views those whom are called terrorists? From the Palestinian perspective, this is the only army they have to fight against the most powerful armed forces in the Middle East. And so while Israel has jet planes all the Palestinian has are people who strap bombs to their chests and blow up kids. And we hear very often that the problem is that the Palestinians naming streets and squares after those who commit suicide, martyrdom from their perspective. And that as long as that happens, as long as the Palestinians make heroes out of these terrorists, that is a symptom of how we can't have peace. And I've always said to myself, and I've said it here on JBS, I do not equate someone who goes out and tries to kill children or blow up a pizza shop with a soldier who is fighting another soldier. But I do understand that from the Palestinian perspective, this is their way of fighting back against an Israeli army which sometimes drops bombs on Palestinian households that destroy children. What do you say?
Well, you know, Mike, but the whole armed struggle would be necessary if the Palestinians would come bona fide to the negotiation table in order to achieve so that's an excuse.
But that's not how you began.
But it's not an so that's an
it's
excuse.
It's not how you began. You began by saying to us, even though you disagree with it, you believe that from the Palestinian perspective it's genuine.
Okay, but look, but that's the problem. I mean, the fact that belief is genuine, it doesn't make it justified.
Correct.
And look, terror is terror. I cannot accept the fact that like happened the other day in the community of Halamish, that a person that comes with a knife to a Shabbat table and butchers the whole family is doing something that under any circumstances can be justified. Under any circumstances called freedom fighters is appalling for me.
I visited Karnei Shomron.
My community, Ma'ale Shomron, is adjacent to Karnei Shomron.
I spoke to many people there, and it was a fabulous day, and we had brought cameras there, and we have shown it here on JBS. And there was a constant theme. This is my home. This is I have an ancient right to here. But if the state of Israel were to ever tell me there could be peace in a two-state solution, if it would happen, I would be willing to stay here under Palestinian sovereignty. And I see no reason, they told me, for me to have to leave if I live under Israeli sovereignty. If you were asked the same question,
I would answer that I have a right to keep living where I am in Ma'ale Shomron. I doubt if I will. Because I made Aliyah from Argentina to live both in the land of Israel and in the state of Israel. So personally, I doubt if I will do it. I'm quite sure I will not. But I definitely think I have a right to do it.
Would some do it?
I assume so, yes.
Okay. So before I lose you this time, how do you look at American Jewry?
Wow. That's the last question? Okay.
There's no rush.
We can't really start a new program. I love American Jewry.
Really?
Yeah. I found here an American Jewry much more warm, much more committed, much more Israel-loving than I expected. And, you know, Mark, people ask me, what did surprise you in New York? And actually not many things. I've been to New York, I assume, 25, 30 times before I came here as Consul General. Never more than 10 consecutive days or something like that. 2 weeks maybe, but no more than that. There's one thing that surprised me. I didn't know that. I didn't know that in virtually every shul, every synagogue, Reform, Conservative, Modern Orthodox, there are two flags. The flag of the United States of America and the flag of Israel. That's quite a statement. That's quite a statement that I didn't expect. And so, look, maybe I am talking obviously about the affiliated community. That is the community that I meet. And we have serious problem of unaffiliated Jews that we are losing. But look, I must admit, I love Jews. I feel comfortable in a Reform synagogue, and I find myself extremely comfortable in also in the wedding of the granddaughter of the Skvera Rebbe in U Square, New York, that I was invited to because we, again, forged a peculiar relationship. I love Jews, and I love them. I really came to love the American Jewish community with all its problems, its the difficulties. I am talking, obviously, in a generic way. And sometimes I ask myself, and I say it, not only ask myself as a rhetoric question, I also have said it in Israeli media. Mark, I'm not saying we don't need the money. It's nice to have the contributions. Just now, for instance, we have a new natural science museum in Tel Aviv University open thanks to a contribution of an American Jew, and the political support, AIPAC, obviously all those things are important. But it's not the same balance that we have in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and even later. I think that today the American Jewry needs Israel more, for sure, no less than Israel needs the American Jewry. And I sometimes ask myself and ask the public in Israel through the media if we meet that challenge. If we as Israelis do for American Jewry or for the diaspora Jewry what we should do. And I'm not sure the answer is positive. In some senses, I have criticism of the Israeli society, in which I say, in some sense, we became, instead of becoming the state of the Jews, the state of the Israelis, and that's wrong. One issue, for instance, the issue of assimilation. People say in Israel sometimes American Jews need us, otherwise they need us, otherwise they will assimilate. I say, what do you mean they need us? It's our problem if American Jews assimilate, and not because of the financial, the contributions, because, in Hebrew we say, in the Bible, Anashim achim anachnu, we are brethren, and it's our responsibility. We are the center of Jewish life, and if we want to be really be the center of Jewish life, that gives you responsibility, and I'm not sure we fulfill as Israelis that responsibility.
And when you talk about American Jewry, one of the things that people are concerned about is whether there is a growing alienation among young Jews, and whether the BDS movement having too much of an impact on college students throughout America. The BDS movement is international, but there is certainly a concern here in America that BDS is making a strong case that Israel is the bad guy.
Yeah, I think that, again, from day one, I told my interlocutors here in New York and the area that I cover that obviously I would like every one of you to support Israel's policies, the government's policies. That's my job. But it doesn't mean that I think that if you disagree with the Israeli policies, you cannot be extremely pro-Israel. I mean, the same positions, Zionist positions that are reflected in the Knesset can be reflected in America. And you can be staunchly pro-Israeli and completely disagree with Israeli government's policy in this issue, in that issue, on all issues. And regarding BDS, BDS in America is limited to the campuses. There is no BDS outside the campuses. The BDS is a tremendous economic failure. Intel just acquired Mobileye for $15 billion. The cultural BDS of Israel is a tremendous failure. You name an artist, from Madonna to Lady Gaga to Justin Bieber to everyone, except that nudnik Roger Waters, that we can live without him. The problem is, as you said, the delegitimization of Israel that is taking place in the campuses. It's an uphill battle, but we have to persist because we are right.
I want you to know something. Everybody who speaks about you loves you. Yotzei min hakol. You are doing an outstanding job, not only for the state of Israel, for the Jewish people, for Amcha.
Thank you so much.
And
it's
I can't thank you.
The Jewish state
Isn't
of
it?
the Jewish people is the
Isn't
same
it?
thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll do this again.
Sure.
Okay.
We have a deal.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The thoughts of Dani Dayan, Consul General for the State of Israel in New York City. He's doing a fabulous job. As we tape today, he is virtually celebrating the anniversary of his first year. How many years, by the way, do you serve?
3 with an optional 4.
Okay, so hopefully we'll have him for another 2 or 3 years, and we will feature him here on JBS as much as possible. He is a remarkable spokesperson for the State of Israel, and as you heard from him, and you've heard it here on JBS all the time, it's all about the Jewish people. That's what it's all about. It's all about people and the Jewish community. As always, I invite you to be in touch with me with any thoughts or comments you may have to any of the ideas expressed by Dani Dayan on this edition of L'Chaim. Please email me, write me, post on our Facebook page, or tweet me. And if you want to be in touch with Dani Dayan, you can send me an email and I will forward it on to him. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. L'Chaim, my friends, to life.
L'Chaim is a presentation of Jewish education in media.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jem, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.